Good afternoon, good morning, whatever it is, wherever you're at. Welcome to yet another podcast here with The Way Forward. Very excited today to bring in a friend, a colleague, a mentor in many ways, Kyle Wilkens, who's with us today. Kyle is a new addition to the Way Forward team. I'm very excited about bringing in this unique skill set. And so today is going to give us a chance to not just meet Kyle, who he is, but it's to understand the significance of his background and how I think our clients at the Way Forward be very interested in figuring out how do we get access to something this unique. And so with that, Kyle, first, thank you for taking the time to do this. Thank you for all the things that you've done from your time on the Hill supporting the American people under Article 1 of the Constitution. You know, we the people and the value of working with Congress and incredible congresspersons like Ike Skelton and Emmanuel Cleaver. So welcome to today's podcast, and let's get started in talking about you. So good day.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
So we're talking to Kyle Wilkens from his home in Missouri, and it would not be relevant unless we had a picture of three pigs on the background. So everybody's not distracted and their eye is pulling to the three pigs. Yeah. Please tell us that's not the three girls on Petticoat Junction. Tell us the real story.
So the real story is when I grew up, my grandpa, not far from here, had a pretty nice hog operation. My wife grew up around hogs. So fast forward, and I'm working in DC, and there's an underground tunnel between the House office buildings and the Capitol building. And when I first got there in 2002, it was just a nasty kind of gray. And when it was decided that they were going to use that tunnel a lot more than they had before, they tried to spruce it up a little bit. So they had each member of Congress put artwork up from constituents all around the country, all around their district, and of course the country. Well, one day I was walking through there, and I happened to see that picture hanging up, and I thought, I like that a lot, and I bet Maggie would like that too. So what I had to do is I had to find out where that picture came from. Went to the Congresswoman's office, and then negotiated with I believe that young lady was 16, 17. And I wasn't too terribly worried about the price. So I'd say for a 16, 17-year-old girl, she was probably pretty excited about her first piece of artwork going for a certain amount of money. So, but that's how it got here, and I like it. It's a nice reminder of what Maggie and I have done since DC.
That's really cool because, yeah. Well, first off, the fact that they did that in that real super secret tunnel that you get to from the Rayburn Building to the Capitol, which most Americans don't get the opportunity to see that, and the other tunnel with the train and all the inside workings of what actually happens to make really all of that sausage making in there that creates the things that are our democracy. So, you got to go down those tunnels, you got to see those secret accesses, you got to be on those trains. Tell us about how did you get into that profession, and what was it like working for, one of the icons in my life growing up, Ike Skelton, who is all about professional military education for the Department of Defense, Goldwater Nichols, all the incredible things that he was involved in. How did you get into that business?
Started in college. The closest thing to politics I knew then were my grandparents, and my grandpa Wilkens liked it when he was younger, but never talked to me about it. My grandpa Schreiman used ag organizations, leadership roles there to help, but it never really was political in the household. The Wilkens side were Dems, Schreiman side were Republicans. So when I end up going to college, I'm going for a history degree. I started aviation, was convinced by a Navy recruiter that you shouldn't learn how to fly before you get to the Navy. Then I tore my knee, and the Navy thing obviously didn't work, but I got into history because I liked it. And that recruiter said, get a degree in something you like and then come back for OCS. Anyway, I'm in college. The Navy thing's probably not going to work. I have to take an elective. And this young lady comes in, professor, and says, hey, we got this internship in Jefferson City. And I thought it sounded pretty cool, so I signed up for it. And um, on the paperwork, it said, what do you prefer? A Democratic member or Republican? And I just put either. And I ended up with a Democrat from in southeast Missouri. Oddly enough, the other person interning in that office was my wife Maggie, um, which is how we met. Anyway, um, that's how it started. I interned part time that year, and then in between was September 11th. So the next year in early 2002, when I signed up, I wanted to do it full time. Well, guess what? Plenty of slots open because nobody wanted to really, everybody was still a little nervous.
Yeah.
So after while I was there in my full time internship, um, a distant cousin of mine was working for Ike Skelton, and he emailed me and he said, "Hey, I'm going back to University of Missouri for law school. If you like what you're doing in Jeff City, you might think about this." So I sent in my resume. I My interview with Ike was in Springfield, Missouri, at a country kitchen at like 6 a.m. And I walked that day from college, and so at the end of the interview, he goes, "We'd like you to come on, take a couple days off, and come out." And I thought he was kidding. I asked him one more time, and he said it again. And so I walked that day. I had my graduation party. I packed the next day, and the day after that, I put in two 50-gallon Rubbermaid tubs, all my stuff on the back of my little Nissan truck, and I drove to DC, and then I stayed there with Ike for about 7 years. That's how it happened. It was an internship in Jefferson City, and I really, somebody told me when I started, once you get it in your blood, it's hard to get it out, and I thought they were kidding, but in my case, it really was. And working for Ike was uh, a lot different than interning in Jefferson City. Um, Jeff City was fine. But when I got to DC, Ike had been there for a long time. I tried not to remind him that he's the only representative I'd ever had up to that point. He was elected in 76. He started in 77. I was born in July of 77. He didn't appreciate when I brought that up, but he was larger than life, and the ability to work for him and learn from him. Um, I'll stop there with Ike unless you want me to
No,
go on.
no,
But
I can say, for the audience, the experience. Well, first off, what an incredible first job out of college. I mean, it's like you skipped all you did an internship. Yeah, but you were still in college, but you went right straight to the pinnacle of a elder statesman's office.
yeah,
And then you traveled with him. I mean, how many countries did you end up going to over that 7 year period of time? Any idea?
that's a good. Well, yeah. Um, and it didn't start off that way. I started as a staff assistant, which is, open mail, do what Ike said, do what everybody says, frankly,
Yeah, you're the
Uh,
nug. You're the
that's
nug in
right.
the front
That's
office.
right. And so that was about a year. And then um, our scheduler was going to leave. And here's the progression again. Like you said, elder statesman. So he'd been around a while. So there were certain things that a guy the guy that age did. And one was he always had female schedulers because
Yep.
that's the way it was. Well, not then. So all of a sudden, the scheduler leaves, and he said, "Kyle, I want you to schedule." And I thought it was a demotion. I'm not going to kid you because usually you move on to a legislative position. It was the best thing that could have happened, probably for my personality. When I started scheduling, it was tough because you scheduled his personal office, but I also scheduled his time around the House Armed Services Committee too, um, which was obviously a blessing in the end. But so what happened is I found out that I had a job that if I did it correctly, every single day there was a sense of accomplishment. If nothing screwed up, I went home and I was happy, or if I drove Ike home. Um, After about a couple months in that job, everybody found out that Kyle was okay with driving. So it really became part of my job as well. I started shortly after I started scheduling, I started driving. I'd pick him up in the morning, take him home. I when he was, I believe it was 15. contract polio, and it affected his arms more than his legs.
Yeah.
So he couldn't drive. Um, I can tell you that if you want to talk about it, in your profession, a life-changing moment, it was A, becoming the scheduler, and B, starting to drive him almost full time because I mean, at that point, over the next 4 years, before he became the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I mean, he was my boss. He was obviously my mentor. He was like my second father. I mean, we did a lot of things together. We were always together. And I learned, I mean, I'm what, 23, 24 then, and I was learning a lot from a 70-year-old man, including when we finally got Sirius radio in his vehicle, and I started driving his vehicle instead of mine.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, it had a 40s station, and like the whatever Miller band would come on. He's like, "Kyle, who's that?" I'm like, "Sir, I don't know." And he goes, "Well, that's blah blah blah. How do you not know that?" I'm like, "Like you're killing me." After about 6 months, I started knowing all of these 40s big bands, and he'd call them out. So that was kind of our thing when I was driving him home, and then for me it was it was very interesting, and it was a learning moment to see Ike, the master in the house, especially the Armed Services Committee during the day, and then as soon as we got in that vehicle, watch him decompress and talk about that day, and it allowed me to understand that somebody like him, the way he needed to be during the day, at the end of the day, he was just like everybody else. Um, he was just able to control that emotion until he was able to just kind of decompress. And at that time I was a big part of that decompression. So it was very interesting.
And I think, a lot of younger people that we work with, and they're out there in their first job, they don't, until, hindsight's 2020, they don't realize that the opportunity you had, it was like, oh, he was a driver for a congressman. How important can that be? Holy cow. I mean, it is like everything you learned in college was dwarfed the first 6 months of doing that, and then was just completely irrelevant the second 6 months you did that. We have the same kind of thing in the Army. We have very same people, and they get assigned an aide de camp who helps them. But it's that time traveling between events where that mentor is intentionally and unintentionally just doing things that you get to sit in the back seat and absorb. I mean, I learned more in those roles than I did when I was in charge, and was able to parse through those just pearls of wisdom and stick them in my little bag of tricks for the future. I saw you in that role, and I remember thinking how incredibly lucky you were to be in that role, because it did pay off. You kept jumping up in the hierarchy because you established relationships, and you did that under his mentorship. You learned things that others didn't learn, the inside workings of things. You understood how to get to him, and you could advise other people how to access him better, so his time was better spent and their time was better spent to accomplish the mission at hand. And then eventually, when he put you became a professional staff member in the House Armed Services Committee, right?
I was
Eventually.
a couple I was a couple years. They called me special assistant to the chairman, and I was there
Okay.
for a couple. But you know what I mean? Yeah, uh, that's and yeah. When he became the chairman, that's
Yeah.
when I went to him and I said, "Ike, I'm ready. This is what I'd like to do." And I can tell you, going back to scheduling, for any young person, especially on the Hill, that goes, "Oh no, I'm going to be the scheduler." It is. I've never been an air traffic controller, but I've been told it's close to that. But I can tell you, if you embrace it, if you live it, and I really did live it. If you embrace that, and you get to know the folks that are coming into the office, it's helpful, and you gain a lot of friends. I had people that I kind of knew from Missouri, and they would come in. You get to know them. But if I can just tell you, the one person that I still stay in touch with today, it's usually about K-State basketball or football, but during when the Iraq War started, I'm in the front office, as the scheduler, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff comes in, and it was Dick Myers then,
Yep.
and I still remember the first time he comes in, he sits down, and all of his aides, they're outside, they don't come in, because he has a 2-star with him generally, and a colonel, and then an aide, and they're carrying his stuff, And I'm not belittling. I'm just saying that's the entourage that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs
All
seemed
those
to have.
little generals. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
The audience said no, Myers is a 4-star. No, he's in the 4-star. He's the 4-star for
Chris, that's the trouble in being in Ike's office. If a 1-star or colonel came in, they were escorting somebody usually, unless it was you in the liaison office. You know what I mean? Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
No.
So he sits down on the couch and he looks not disgruntled, but just in his own area, and he just looked like he wasn't comfortable. And I thought to myself, I just imagined, well, it's war number 2. I can't imagine what this guy goes through. I see him on TV next to Donald Rumsfeld, and it's got to be a tough job. I mean, so it was time for him to go in, and he went in and saw Ike, and he came back out the next time. It was in April of, I can't remember what year. Well, I could guess, but you've seen on the back of the truck, you can put on your receiver hitch like a deer head or a turkey. So I bought one of those things and I put it on my desk as a protest turkey, which I hated because as long as spring turkey season was going on in Missouri and I wasn't there, I had that turkey right on the front of my desk.
Your inability to go turkey hunting.
That's correct. So the next time General Myers came in, he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, that's my protest turkey." And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And I explained it. And he sat down on the couch and he goes, "Well, tell me about this turkey hunting." So I did. And for the next year and a half, every time he came in, he would talk turkey hunting with me. And no kidding, it was almost like, I don't want to speak for him, but when he came in, it was almost like he could forget everything and just talk to this crazy guy from Missouri that is upset about not being able to go turkey hunting. And so to this day, every few months or so, we'll shoot a note back and forth, and that's one of those relationships that you can do when you take a position that you think this might not be me. This may be something that's lower than I think I'm at my ability. I'm not saying that's how I felt, but sometimes as a scheduler on the Hill, that happens. You can really turn those type of positions into opportunities. And Chris, that's really what I did. And that allowed me to then work on the House Armed Services Committee because of the relationships I had built with not only folks in all the services or leaders in all the services, because those are the people coming in, and then staff on the Armed Services Committee. They trusted me to get the right people in, to get them time, and so to go back to your original, how many countries? I started on the Armed Services Committee in October of 2007. So, well, we went to Iraq. We went to Kosovo. Let's see, the Kosovo, and then I think there was France, there was Germany. Let's see, there was Italy, there was Afghanistan, there was Turkey. Ankara was incredible. I'm still upset that we didn't get to go to Incirlik. I was looking forward to that. But and then what was the last trip? Oh, was the Far East trip. So that was Okinawa, that was Iwo Jima, South Korea. It was Guam. It was quite a trip.
This your first year, or this your whole time?
That was in right at 2 years in the Armed Services Committee. I missed a couple of trips. Remember the Iraq trip we went, and it was Christmas.
Yeah,
we
took turkeys to. I mean, we took Missouri cured hams to a Muslim country. You mean that one?
Yeah, well, that was Kosovo.
But
yes, that's right.
But we went to had an audience with the Pope. We went to Rome.
That is correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
That was something. No, it was. I
so
mean, you talk about a whirlwind from a guy. Well, and
oh yeah.
the same
Yeah.
type of whirlwind you had. You're from Red Oak, Iowa. I'm from Concordia, Missouri. I mean, town of 2,300 for me. I think Red Oak's smaller. So you know,
Yeah.
pretty
93
incredible
days.
stuff.
So yeah, two Midwestern guys just walked into two professions and ended up circumventing the earth a number of times. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and for our younger audience, you have no idea. I mean, I in the military, I made a career out of taking the what appeared to be the dead end jobs or the nobody wants job, and I had a great mentor, a guy named Dave Perkins, who did the Thunder Run down into Baghdad during the war, the first, the second Iraq war, whatever,
Yeah.
Iraqi freedom, and he came and he told all the majors at the Army University, he goes, you guys are sitting around splitting frog hairs, complaining about what job you're going to get out of this school. He goes, we wouldn't have the job if it wasn't critical to the function. We don't have excess jobs laying around. We go, I just do that for a while. He goes, every one of them is important. And here I am, a colonel coming out of brigade command in Honduras. I'd been running security force assistance and cooperation through Central and South America, counter narcotics, counter human trafficking, some kinetic stuff here and there.
Right.
And I'm upset doing that because I'm not in the surge in Iraq. And I'm down here doing another front. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I learned when I'm down there, holy cow, I am the king of the world down here. I don't have anybody looking at me nor telling me what to do. So I get to be truly in command. And then out of that, they go, hey, we're going to make you the Army liaison to Congress. I'm like, well, okay, my career's over with. This is a dead end job because all 22 of my predecessors had all retired out of that job.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was coming, which I didn't know, is your boss was friends with the then chief of staff of the Army, George Casey. They had an agreement from when Casey was lieutenant colonel and Ike was matriculating, up through the hierarchy.
Yep.
When you and I are in charge, we're going to fix this. The Army is going to pay attention to working with Congress, speaking to Congress, and then having somebody get promoted so they can keep working with us to understand how we work. And that was our relationship. And the beauty of it was the Army had no idea that I knew Ike through my wife's family. And that was the funniest day ever, riding over with General Casey, tremendous man, under a lot of pressure, just like General Myers was when you saw him. An extreme introvert, it's very uncomfortable for an extrovert like me to ride from the Pentagon in the armored vehicles and all those vehicles and cutting across 14th Street Bridge and driving up on curbs because you can't stop. And
right.
And I'm sitting there the whole time and I'm looking at this 4-star going, holy Christ, I'm in here by myself. As an extrovert, I feel like I should feel the air.
Yep. Oh boy.
As I learned, that's not a good idea with him. I bit my tongue, which was so hard to do. Got there, walked in, and Ike goes, "Hey, you're the guy whose wife's from Richmond, Missouri." And immediately, because my kids were all baptized at Wentworth Military Academy at the Catholic Church there.
Yeah.
Sister-in-law lived across the street, down the alley from Ike and his wife. It was crazy to accidentally have this whole thing come together, and then me sitting around pouting because I'm thinking I'm heading into a dead end job. And again, just tremendous amount of things that I learned from you and your kindness of helping me to establish that relationship with Ike, because the Casey had me there for a very specific reason, as did Pete Guerin, the Secretary of the Army, which was, we got to convince the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee that the Army is going to start paying attention and start listening. And Ike was being very kind, said, we'll travel with the Army. Because he'd always traveled with the Navy up to that point, or at least
Navy and the Air Force.
Yeah. And so got to go on a couple trips with him, got to do some fun stuff. Got to meet you and watch you behind the scenes. And so incredible. Hey, yeah.
For your audience, just so nobody thinks that Chris is selling himself short, Ike's exact words to Army leadership was, "We need heavy hitters in the Army liaison office." And that's what they sent him.
I was
No kidding.
I was the fattest available colonel that they could find. So I was swinging heavy and fat, ready to go. But no, it was great. Every bit. And I tell you, for me, it was humbling. It was eye opening because I'd never seen the inner workings, and it paid me such great dividends. And it really did, as Ike and General Casey envisioned. It helped the Army. I mean, I see this painting behind me, and I can't help but think about Ike. Uh, we'll tell that story in a second. I think
Yeah.
our lessons that we're pulling out of this from our storytelling is better than saying you need to be this as a leader, you need to be this as a subordinate, you need this as a mentor. These stories of what he did are they're eye opening to me, and I think where you have to go back again. Kyle and I'm sorry if the listeners aren't interested in Ike Skelton, but he's an icon in the history of this great nation, and there's stories all the way back to Squire Boone, his grandfather, Daniel Boone's son, who survived. I mean, this man's history with Truman and Eisenhower and everything that he did growing up. Kyle and I were the beneficiaries of that knowledge and wisdom and mentorship. But I don't think I truly 100% got Ike until, people don't realize Ike wanted to be an Army officer so bad. And he went to Wentworth Military Academy in his hometown, Lexington, Missouri, where he and his wife never moved from. And it's a small military academy across the street, literally like 3 blocks from where he lived. And he went there with full intention of serving in the Army. And he got polio when he was there, which is, I think, very applicable to today that, we go, people got polio. Yeah. It wasn't that long ago. And Ike had polio. And when you hear the story of how he fought through that polio as a cadet at a military academy and then finished at a military academy, although he was not given the opportunity to be commissioned as an officer because of his polio, when you walk in there and you see the little thing where they've dedicated an area to him, and you see a picture of this man who ran the 200 or the 220, I think it probably was the 220 back then. He was a sprinter, and he was a very good sprinter, and he did very, very well before his polio. But it was after his polio when the coach would take athletic tape and tape his arms to his sides so he could run without his arms flopping around because he had lost the use of both of his arms with that polio. And to see that man gutting through a sprint against others and winning and persevering. And as I would constantly remind me, I was the number 1 graduate of my class, but I couldn't commission because of my polio. I mean, the intestinal fortitude of somebody and the character as a young man, a college kid, to fight through that, to me, was always very impressive. But even more important was the man's love for military history. He did love the big bands, and I never got as good with you with that when I traveled. But in his office, like my office, I have a historical painting. And I hung the Battle of Bushy Run over his couch in his office. And he was fixated on that battle back in the Indian Wars up north, the French Indian, American War, where this officer on his own in the middle of nowhere used a feint. He did a deliberate ambush, and he took out a very, very large Indian French force that was trying to attack his small group of soldiers that were trying to relieve a garrison up there. And to him, it was about innovation. It was about initiative. It was about all the things that he, as a historian, a military historian, felt were critical leadership tools. And so every leader in the military that walked into that office and sat at that couch, if you didn't know the story, if you didn't know the lessons, if you weren't prepped, if you didn't take time to read it, you didn't have a meeting with Ike. You had a class with Ike.
Yep.
To make the point that if you're a leader in my Army, Air Force, Navy, or Marine Corps, you better understand military history. And he was a huge advocate for us we do training but more importantly, we do education. And that's what he's known for. That's why at the Army University, the Carl Library is now the Combined Arms Research Library is the Ike Skelton Combined Research Library, because Ike was that icon for us. And he's a bust at the National War College. He's a bust at the National Defense University because he saw the requirement for education, education, education. So to me, there's no more unsung hero than the guy you and I have privilege to work with. So I'm just putting that out for the audience. I'm sorry I talked too long. So now you get out of this, you go out, now you jump into Emmanuel Cleaver's office because now you want to get your family settled back in Missouri. So you go back.
Yep, that's right.
So now you've got this national level experience as you're young. So you've seen the inside workings of the sausage. Now you go back out to the district. So now you get this district experience. What kind of nuances did you pull from that experience?
I could give you probably two stories are the best. One, 2012, we had a pretty nasty drought here, and specifically it affected all three counties that I worked in for Ike: Ray, Lafayette, and Saline. These are rural counties. I'm sorry, for Emmanuel Cleaver. So Congressman Cleaver, most of his district was around Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, a little bit of Clay, and then Ray, Lafayette, and Saline. During the time I was with him, he hadn't had rural counties in his district before, so that was my job.
Yeah.
As a side note, he did grow up in rural tech. He understood rural more than most people understood. So having those three counties wasn't as big of a deal as some people thought. Now, let's go back to me basically working those counties for him for him as a congressman. So we have this drought. Ray County specifically had an issue with running out of water for livestock. And so it was a two-tier issue, right? Not enough water or water pressure when they need it, and then loss of livestock and no program. There's really no program or indemnity program if you lose livestock to adverse weather. Now, of course, we know there is for crops. Pretty famously, crop insurance that the government helps subsidize with private insurers. However, for animals, unless you have your own private insurance, you're out of luck when it comes to the government. So what we did, the first thing we did was we got together with USDA Rural Development, and in rural areas, they really, if you have a water issue, be it clean water or sewage, and you're having problem with, say, running line to get that water somewhere or cleaning that sewage, many times, if you can't do it through natural resources through the state, you're going to come to USDA Rural Development. So we had rural development, the county commissioners, and some of the farmers that were affected to start talking about how do we fix, not now, but how do we fix the next one? And they ended up being able to put in a new tank out there, and that worked out at the local level. That's how we were able to fix that problem. Now, the other problem is a problem of there's no program. So I got together with Cleaver staff in Washington, D.C., and we put a bill together, and we had one co-sponsor. It was Congressman Graves. Thank goodness, because we needed that one to drop the bill.
He's Northwest Missouri, right?
That's correct.
Yep.
Almost all of Northwest Missouri take that's 36 north. That's he basically needs a private jet to get around from the west to the east side of the state. He's got pretty much all of it.
And he's a pilot, so he pretty much takes care of that himself.
That's right. So both staffs agreed that it makes sense. Let's see what happens. And basically what happened is we dropped the bill. And when I say drop the bill, what you do is you file it with the clerk of the House, and then it gets assigned the correct committee. Well, our bill didn't. It made it to committee. It didn't go anywhere. However, what it did do was became an amendment to the farm bill that passed, and lo and behold, now we have a livestock indemnity program. It's not it's not large. It's nothing like some of the other FSA programs, but um, that that drought, and specifically me being in these three rural counties with that experience from DC, allowed us to not only prepare for the next drought, specifically in Ray County, but also prepare for that livestock issue in the next drought. Or it's not just in the livestock indemnity program. It's not just drought. It's really any adverse weather, so lightning strike, so that's one example of my experience from Washington and legislative and understanding how some things work, applying it, being in the district, and then the ability to the folks back in DC to then work an issue like that. Because um, a lot of times there's a disconnect between the district and Washington DC, and some of that is just maybe the district folks don't think that's something we can do, or the DC folks don't know what's going on and how to fix it. And for me, I was able to bridge that gap because of that experience. And go ahead. Sorry, excuse me.
No, I was just I just for our audience, I want to make sure let's bulletize that very quickly, because you and I both completely understand how that works, because we have both sides of the experience, and that's one of the things we provide at the Way Forward, is the ability to provide that at the local level, because there are all different kinds of ways to solve problems today. But the key to understanding how to work at the national level, at the Congress itself, is to institutionalize a solution. You can fix things, the immediacy of it's the old adage of, I can fix the roof when it's raining, or I can fix the roof before it rains. But more importantly is, have I fixed the roof with an insurance to cover it over the long haul? And so somebody like you, with your experience and with my experience, that's why when you look at our website, we don't just have somebody like you that's going to advise them. We also have the lobbyists that sit up there on Capitol Hill that get that language written for our clients and dropped in the right box of the right member. And the members as well. And then we say, look, you should take this and institutionalize it through the formal budgeting process, so that money is there year after year after year, and the program gets codified, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid on an issue over and over and over again. And we see that with so many clients that work with the federal government, is they'll get something this year, they'll get end of year dollars, and you get $1 million to go do something, but next year that money's not available because you didn't budget it. And so that's a tremendous example. Give us another example, Kyle.
Well, if you're okay, the other example is probably more about relationships, and I'll bullet this one a little bit better. So I'm still working in the district in Lafayette County for Congressman Manuel Cleaver, and a friend of mine called me and said, at the time he was a former Marine. He was contracting in Afghanistan, and he said the young lady's been kicked off the base. She's an interpreter. We're not exactly sure why, but we don't think it's, basically they didn't know why, but they did know she was in grave danger. And he said, "Can you do anything?" I mean, I'm sitting in Lafayette County in Missouri, so I told him, I said, if she can send me a release form, this is a form that everybody signs if you want to get help from the congressman, be it IRS, be it veterans issues. I had never done this before. This is not an American citizen that's sending this back, but I was going to go by the book in case anybody came back to me and said, "Hey, you can't do this." I was like, "Well, I did it. It's right there. It's too, as far as I'm concerned, it's too late. We're already rolling." So I did. I got that information from her. She sent it back, and I started working something called the special immigrant visa process.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of the movie, but Jake Gyllenhaal's in it, and it's about somebody trying to get some people out. And if you watch the movie, You'll see him start the SIV process, drink himself drunk, fall down, and then get up the next morning and say, forget that. I'm calling my buddy over there. We're going to get him out by force. Well, Kyle Wilkens, congressional staffer, did not have anybody on the ground to do something like that. So I had to fight through this red tape, and it was. And so for about a year, it was just a lot of paperwork with USCIS, and then the State Department.
Yeah.
So I'll fast forward after that year, and the Taliban is starting to take large swaths of land in Afghanistan, and we're at the point with the State Department that she's ready to go. We just now it's paperwork, and I can tell you this right now. I was sitting at my computer one day, and Maggie asked me what was wrong, and I kind of told her, and she goes, listen, she goes, you've gotten this far. You just do what you got to do to get her out of there. And my mind started spinning. So basically, Chris, what I did is that at that point, I just started emailing or calling every person I could think of that might be able to help. So there was somebody I worked with on the House floor that was now at the White House. There was a staffer in Senator Klobuchar's office. She was on, I believe, Foreign Affairs or SASC. I can't remember. Reached out to that person. Of course, I reached out to HASC because I still had a lot of friends that I'd worked with there. Reached out to someone on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And those are the ones I can think of. And I just did the throw everything at the wall and see what happens. And frankly, what happened is someone in HASC, who was a liaison to the State Department, got me in touch with the person that would have been on the ground in Afghanistan if the embassy was open.
Yeah.
And without being told, her application went to the top, and then she flew out of there the day before the Taliban really started to take Kabul. It was the day before those pictures of folks falling out of the C-17, and
Yeah.
I could not have gotten her out of the congressman's office. The congressman could not have gotten her out of there without all those relationships I had from before in Ike Skelton's office. She would be there or worse. And that's, for me, it was a all encompassing example of what I had done from my start in Ike's office to the point when she landed at Dulles and I found her at the seedy Best Western hotel that the State Department put all those folks in until they spread them out. But that's my other example. There are a few more. There are a few more legislative examples, but those are the two that I hang on to.
Okay. And so the lessons on that are obvious: relationships, 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 and that's
Yes,
what you're bringing is all kinds of inside relationships from the White House to Congress, all the way back to your district in Missouri, and then of course, then you transition into USDA, which is near and dear to my heart because I was involved in a USDA project. We only got about 10 minutes, so I want to just wrap
yes,
up
sir.
capability.
Yeah, Chris.
But what I've learned about having moved back to my hometown and back here in Iowa is that the USDA does a tremendous job helping people in this part of the country, not to just cover them with money and make them stop complaining, to really do things like fire prevention and cattle loss and animal things that you're talking about, prevention of fires and things that could have a huge impact on the economy of the United States if not regulated and controlled and provided access to the families that are out here and the industries that are out here. And so you bring that wealth of experience from Missouri, but because you were the man in Missouri, of course, everybody in USDA across the spread. And that's what we're hoping we can bring all of this experience here because there's such a need for it here. And I think in the Midwest, what we don't know how to write legislation. We don't know. We just don't live with it every day like people on the coast do.
Right.
Those people on the coast understand how to make that system work for them. And those of us in the, the flyover states, as they call us, the heart of this country,
Yeah.
don't always have people out here to help that, because it's not as lucrative for people with your experience. You could go east and make a hell of a lot more money, or west and make a heck of a lot more money than if you stayed here. But like you came back.
Yeah.
You did your time like I did on the Hill, and you said, I'm going back to where it all matters to
You
us
bet.
and our families. And so, real quick, with USDA, you now have Ike's office, you have Hask office, you have district work with
Cleveland.
Cleaver. You're bringing people back from Afghanistan. You're writing congressional language to make things happen for farmers, and then you share that with other districts that were outside of your districts. You wrote the language, you changed the law, you changed the budget. Well, you took advantage of the law how you're supposed to, and you wrote language, and you put things into place. Now you're at USDA. Your state, under your control, Missouri, is the top fourth state to use USDA to support its people, far and beyond all the states around it. How did
Yes.
why do you think the other states didn't have the same kind of success you did? What did you bring to the table that made you uniquely qualified to do that? And
If
I
you're
know
asking me,
you're
go ahead.
humble. You're humble. And he's gonna dance around this. So let's let time drive your answer.
Okay.
What
I
did
will
you,
not, I
what
will
did
not
you
dance
do?
around it.
Tell me why Kyle and your team made that happen.
What I believe made that happen is, um, what we did. We were coming out of COVID as soon as I came on. Frankly, I allowed my staff flexibility. Um, we maximized telework because it had been proven that the state could do it during COVID, and I thought we could be better, um, in a hybrid stance. Our agency, rural development, was not able to go fully remote, and I don't think that would have been helpful, because we do have to outreach. Um, so flexibility for the staff, and I say that because, um, I think if your staff is happy with their work environment and what they're doing, that they'll work harder, and they'll feel like they have ownership of what they're doing in the programs, and they truly believe that they're helping their neighbors and Missourians. It's a little more focused for them, and I think that's important. And allowing their work-life balance to fit their needs, I think helps, because with our policy on telework, you could go into the office every day if you wanted to, or you could use up to the allowed time to telework, whatever
Okay.
fit the best need for that person. Um, and because of the way RD works, that works for us. We're less of a service organization. We're more of a go out, find what cities, what municipalities have issues, and then work with them. So outreach is a big part of what we do. So,
Right.
so A, flexibility. B, I gave the field staff. Um, we have about 77 people. There's 4 area directors in leadership, 3 program directors in leadership, me and a deputy. The rest are field staff. What I noticed very quickly was, um, there was a lot of consolidated power at our state office between national office, Washington, D.C., who makes the final decision, and our field staff. So what I did was I took a fair amount of those decision-making powers, and I gave them to our field staff, so they could feel like it's less of an over, looking over your shoulder feel for them. They know the people. They go out and outreach. They work with these folks in these towns and these counties. They help put together the project, and then when they have it all put together, then they had a sense of, well, somebody is going to really nitpick this. It's going to come back. Then the national office is going to do the same thing, and they really felt like they weren't being trusted. So I tried to take that trust. I tried to give them that trust and, well, give a person enough rope. I mean, you find out who can really achieve out there and who may not be able to be up to the task, but it was hard for me to understand that unless I gave them the keys of the car to drive it. I think that helped because I found out that a vast majority of my staff were very good at what they did, and they really liked having the ability to move these projects on their own and get things done. And when that happened, um, when I would go down and have the big ribbon cutting, they were the folks that we that we'd let talk that the event. I was there because somebody's got to dress up and look like they're the boss, right? But I
That's
mean,
right.
it's our field staff that the folks that made it happen. They're the ones that spoke at the event, and they're the ones that I was able to praise. And it was so flexibility
All right, Kyle,
and
I'm gonna
trust.
help you, brother. So you empowered them, you gave them flexibility.
Yes, sir.
How did you, as the leader of that organization, manage to get more money and more resources to the people of Missouri than the surrounding states? What did you, the manager, the boss, the leader, you took care of your team. Your team created these demand signals to your office. How did you get the resources that exceeded your peers across the country? And don't hold back. What was the secret to that sauce? Why were you better?
I think the big secret to that sauce was me getting to DC and getting to know the people that move the projects. Um, at a minimum, regardless if they liked or trusted me, at a minimum, I wanted an administrator of one of these program areas to see the final sign off Missouri and go, oh, that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know who that guy is. Because at the end of the day, eh, the sole purpose for me to go to Washington, D.C. to meet folks in the USDA building South and Witten was to make sure that they knew where Missouri was and what we were about. Try to make it a little more personal for them because most of them, well, none of them, while I was there, were from Missouri.
yeah.
That, from my position, that was the secret sauce. It was getting those relationships, getting them out to Missouri if I could, and frankly, no matter what happened with a project, I tried to, even though sometimes you want to get upset, I tried to always remember that you get more flies with honey. So I was always very respectful, and I didn't. You get more flies with honey, and the other thing is, it's important to remember that you're not that important when
Yep.
you're with those folks.
But it will conclude with this. But I did very similar in cadet command. I could go travel and play with cadets all over the world and have a lot of fun and travel and increase my mileage for my airlines card, or I can put my leaders out there, empower them, decentralize them, give them very broad left and right limits of my priorities, and then go to DC and fight for resources. Fight, 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 fight. At some point, that's what the CEO has to do. Is if you set the conditions for your team, take care of your team, they'll do the right things. And if they don't, you pull some of that power back to you, you develop them, and then you turn them loose again. But your job is to get them what they need: the autonomy, the prioritization, the resources. Okay. And so that's what you did in Missouri that was radically different than your peers. And that's not meant to cite any of your peers. It's just a leadership technique that needs to be taught. You intuitively knew to do that based on your experience, which is probably vastly different than the others that are out there. And so for our clients that are going to be in this space, they got to know that that's the kind of guy that we're going to send out and help you to do this. And then we'll talk later to the guy who's going to help them write, the proposals and the grants and the stuff to back you up. And so we're going to conclude there, Kyle. I can't tell you how excited I am about having you to work with you again. I respect the heck out of you. You know that you're a brother to me, and I think we can really, really make a positive impact on our brothers and sisters here in the Midwest by leveraging our friendships, or at least on the East Coast up there on the other side of the Potomac. Well, actually, on both sides of the Potomac River,
You bet.
you and I know how to open those doors and how to make those relationships and to find the right people. They're always there. They just kind of change chairs, and so they're all changing chairs right now. We'll figure out
You know
how
it.
to take advantage of that. Thanks
Yes,
again
sir.
for
Yeah,
thanks again for joining us today, Kyle. It is always a pleasure, my friend.
I enjoyed this. Thank you, Chris. This was great.
Thank